So Sasha, it's great to see you. We've come to London 10 months on from launching Get Construction Talking. It's been an incredible year. How have you found it?
I think it's been such a massive response. We've had such a massive response from everyone sharing and responding to. I know you've gotten messages, I've gotten private messages as well from so many in our network, and it's just been amazing how well this effort's been received. And I think we've made probably more progress than I had anticipated in 10 months. I was thinking, okay, every year let's check in and see where we are, but the last 10 months have really told us that this conversation is long overdue and the industry is really ready to have a conversation about mental health and what we're doing about it, most importantly.
Absolutely. I remember thinking back to that launch period and being quite nervous about it. You know, we spent quite a lot of time putting it together, but when you actually get to that moment of putting it out there, it's a big thing to bring up and talk about in the industry, isn't it? It's not something the industry is inherently that good at talking about.
Yeah, no, I think it's like so many things. Like when you do a webinar or you're doing a conversation in industry and you open up to the audience for Q&A, there's always that uncomfortable 3 minutes while you're waiting for somebody to bravely break the silence. I feel like we experienced a little bit of this as well with the campaign, which was, honestly, you kind of started and set the tone for how vulnerable you're going to be and how much you're going to share. And I think that just gave permission to others to ask questions, to share their own story. And so I think it just took time for people to become comfortable with, well, what's my narrative in this conversation? And now we can't stop it. Like the floodgates are opened and people are talking about it.
Absolutely. I mean, Get Construction Talking is the name of the campaign. That's really what we both agree industry needs to do, right? This is about going deeper than mental health first aiders or posters on the wall. It's about deeper behavioural change. And we've always said that, you know, the people that know you best in construction are the people you work with every day, the people you go to lunch with, go for a drink with, go from site to site with. And the goal of this campaign is to raise awareness. If we can enable those people to better spot the signs, to intervene and ask, are you okay? And point those people to support from the fantastic charities worldwide if they need it, we can, through what we're doing, effectively create millions of mental health first aiders across the whole industry, everyone in the industry, at all levels worldwide. I think that's the fantastic power of the B1M and Procore, and I think bringing that to the table has been, you know, bringing our reach and leverage to the table to support the charities has been fantastic.
Yeah, I don't think we could have thought of a better partnership with the B1M and Procore, which both organizations kind of specialize in marketing and outreach, you being a media company, and Procore as a platform technology just has this massive megaphone. And so us coming together to spark a conversation, I think has reached corners of the industry. I wasn't sure if we would be able to engage in this conversation, but that massive reach that we both have has really been, I think, key in getting the kind of the call to action, start talking. It really has sparked it across the globe. It wasn't just one regional area, and so I think that's a big piece of the momentum behind it.
I was going to say, we've both been there for the London launch 10 months ago. We've been there in Chicago, we've been there in Sydney. Geographic markets are a very long way apart from each other, but the response has been pretty similar. I don't know if you found that. What have you found that to be like as we've gone to these different places? We've had this pretty difficult conversation that hasn't really been had at this level before in the industry. How have you found the reaction? Were you surprised by it? Were you taken aback by it? How did you find it?
So a little bit of a spoiler alert, as somebody who's worked in technology and had the opportunity to work with businesses across the globe, specifically in the markets you just spoke to, I learned pretty early that we think we are different from each other when we're really not. The process of construction is so similar. The structure of these disparate businesses coming together for a common cause to create a common product means that the lion's share of problems and challenges that are experienced are universal. But I think by nature, we think of different geolocations and different cultural norms as creating differences between us. But I already had that experience knowing that construction does struggle with the same challenges across the globe, regardless of the governmental or cultural structures. But the conversation around mental health, I did think would be a little bit tricky because there are cultural components about talking about things of this nature that could really influence how accessible or how open is that region to having the conversation we were trying to start. And I think the thing that really struck me was there is such a pent-up need to talk about this, and there's just been no outlet. There's been no common place for people to come and have the conversation. So although the nuances may be different, universally, this really does connect us. This is really something that businesses across the globe do need to use the collective knowledge in order to sort out. Regional and local action is really, really important. But understanding that globally this is a challenge, I think should be a lesson to construction, essentially, that your industry is so similar even in these different geolocations.
Absolutely. I think the reaction's taken me back in a way, because I remember the first time I talked about my mental health experience at Procore's Groundbreak conference in 2022, it was incredibly daunting. And I remember thinking, my heart racing and thinking, are people going to judge me? Are they going to think I'm weak? Am I wrong for bringing this up? Is this not the right environment to bring it up? Is it a bit awkward? But what I've been really struck by, not just from that moment, but from launching this campaign as well, is how positively this has been received by industry, how much people have recognized it. You know, silently, we've all had this kind of feeling within us and recognized this issue, but to see people talking about it and go, I feel the same way, I relate to what you're talking about, this is a good thing we should all be doing, how can we help, is incredibly inspiring, because there's so much in today's world, there are so many things in today's world that we don't agree on, and in the industry that we don't agree on. So to find something that we do all agree on and to be rowing in the same direction on is a pretty encouraging feeling, and it's really reassuring that, as difficult as it was to open up about my mental health journey and to bring this conversation up in the industry, to see the impact it's having, I think reassures me that it was the right thing to do, right?
It was incredibly brave. And I remember when I was sitting in the audience, attending and listening to you speak, and I give you a ton of credit, the composure you maintained, because if you've seen the actual keynote, at the exact moment you were about to share this very personal, sensitive information, literally outside of the hall was this, I don't know if it was a truck horn, if it was a ship horn, some giant horn sounded, which inside, as soon as that moment happened, I just thought, wow, this is either going to be a great icebreaker for Fred to like take a breath and know that this is the journey he's embarking on, or really destabilizing. I'm not sure which one it was for you, but from the outside you recovered very well and just kind of went with it. But I think it was also very much characteristic of, this is not a rehearsed conversation. This is not something you really can polish and plan. In order for you to really have a conversation on mental health, there needs to be an element of vulnerability, there needs to be an element of imperfection, and an acceptance of that imperfection. I think we as an industry strive ever more efficient, quality and safety. Like, there's such an excellence that we strive for in this industry. But if we're not willing to look at the imperfections of what the unintended consequences are of some of the ways that we operate as a business, we'll never really be able to move the needle on mental health and construction. So, as probably unnerving as that was for you, I thought it was a great representation of, this is not a rehearsed conversation.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest barriers to talking were those barriers that I experienced, because my mental health journey, to articulate it, it's not always rational, it's not always sequential, it doesn't always make sense, it isn't that polished. It's something I'm working out understanding myself, as we all are, those of us who struggle with our mental health. But embracing that and leaning into that and just doing it anyway, even though my whole life through construction and through running my own business, I've been trained to maintain that sort of level of perfection and high standards. And I think many people watching can relate to that as well. They see their progression in their career in construction linked to achieving perfection and achieving high results all the time. And yes, that's important. But when it comes to your mental health, talking about it, opening up about it, as you say, showing that weakness, recognizing that weakness and dealing with it, it doesn't come naturally to us, but it's a huge, huge shifter in helping you work through your own processes, but also creating a culture and an environment where other people feel able to do the same. Mm-hmm. I think in this somewhat stoic industry that we have in construction, where there is this culture of keep going, work harder, turn the pressure up all the time, having that recognition that there is this space to talk about what you're going through and open up is incredibly important.
And I think it touches on the way construction has survived and been able to thrive as an industry over the years has been based on the people who choose to work in this industry. You talk about the stoic nature. I always say that those who choose construction are inherently problem solvers. They did not go into banking and finance. They don't want banking hours. They're individuals who like an intellectual challenge, like a physical challenge. And I think that's inherent to construction. But where I feel like we may be missing the mark of where society and where the world is today is the opportunity for all sorts of people to be able to choose construction as a career and to be able to thrive in our industry is inhibited by some of these more what I call foundational beliefs, the stoicism, buck it up, suck it up. These ideas that your grit and your perseverance is the thing that's going to be essential to you getting your job done. In a modern society where we have technology that allows us to decouple the information from the physical representations of things, so we used to have paper drawings in the field, and now hopefully we've migrated to electronic forms that are stored in the cloud where everyone has access at any time, that creates a really different working environment. And so you may no longer need brute force to overcome the unforeseen challenges that come in the field. But I think we as an industry need a little more grace. Grace with each other, grace with understanding. We're going through probably one of the biggest transformational shifts that this industry has ever experienced with the digital implementation of technology and tools. And we need to give each other grace that there's a lot we still haven't figured out. We've come a long way in how we operate in the business of construction, but this mindset and mentality of brute force and stoicism, suck it up, those things aren't helpful in a current modern society. And so I think it's been amazing to me, the conversations we've had have branched out very quickly into tools and process and people, policy, culture. And I think that's the conversation construction needs to be having now.
Absolutely. I think what's been really interesting as you and I have launched this in London, Chicago, Sydney, there's obviously local nuance to those conversations, but we've seen an industry that is actually very similar and going through similar things with similar challenges, with that similar working culture between those geographic markets, even though they're tens of thousands of miles apart in some cases. Which is, I don't know, for me, I found that quite saddening in a way that this industry is grappling with this issue worldwide. But it's also an opportunity, because if we can crack this in one location, we can spread it globally as well, and the industry can follow suit. And I think there is that understanding now that mental health is just as important as physical health.
Yes.
And this understanding that we all have mental health, whether it is good or bad. It can be good some days, it can be bad other days, just like our physical health. And this concept and kind of theory in construction that you can only be successful if you don't have any mental health problems and perform at your best all the time is akin to saying, well, with your physical health, you can't ever be sick. And if you are sick, you have to hide it and not talk about it, which is just, we just wouldn't do that, would we? So I think there is that recognition now, there is a behavioural shift starting where people are starting to grasp that this is about our people, it's about our culture, our businesses, our organisations, our industry runs on its people, and we need to invest in our people. I run a small business. I know that anyone watching this running a business will know, or working in a team will know, that it runs on people. And if your people turn up and they are tired, stressed, depressed, overworked, you're not going to get the best out of them. So investing in mental health, tackling this issue that is so pervasive across our industry, for me, it's not one of those nice to have things on the side. It's not something you should be seen to be doing. It is critical to your business success. If you want to hit the budget, if you want to hit your profitability target, if you want to get your project finished on time, you have got to invest in your people. It's your people who are going to get you there. So I think linking this to business performance more clearly for people is really important, because as I said, it's not a side issue. It's something that is central to making your business, our teams, and this industry thrive.
And I give leaders a lot of credit, because I don't think that point is missed on anyone. In the conversations that we've had, I have found that many leaders feel uncomfortable in this dialogue. They're not sure what their role should be or how they should show up in this conversation. And specifically, if they themselves have not experienced anything related to a mental health crisis or being aware of their own mental health, it's foreign territory. But I do see a keen interest in wanting to be seen as taking action, wanting to lead in this regard. And I think one of the things that I equate it to is, let's think of your golf game. So much of the golf game is really, there's muscle memory and the physicality of your swing and all those things. But if you have one bad swing right off the tee at the start of your round of golf, that mentally messes with you. For the rest of the game, all you're thinking of is don't shank, like you're thinking don't do this thing. And that very much impacts the performance of how you will perform on that course. And so I equate mental health very much to the same thing. We as business leaders cannot separate the mental component of the people who work within our organizations. It's a naive way of viewing resource management. And I think that some of the most brightest minds, best minds that I love listening to today are they're almost like organizational therapists. They look at organizational psychology, because so much of performance has to do with the mind and your state of mind. And if you're ready for that performance, elite athletes understand this. So I think businesses are recognizing this as a component that they have to acknowledge and have to have a response to and consider. But I think for many leaders, they're just very unsure, what's my starting point?
I think it's an interesting point though, because the message I've really picked up and that I've really learned as we've gone through this is that everyone in this industry is responsible for helping to tackle the mental health crisis that we're facing, just as everyone in this industry is responsible for physical health and safety, whether that is in the office, in the boardroom, on the job site, in the job trailer, on wherever it may be, whatever you may be working on. There is that culture with physical health and safety that we all have a responsibility through every aspect of planning, design, site selection, construction site management, operation and maintenance once the building's open. All of that is built around a physical health and safety culture. We're at a stage now where I think most of us, if we arrived at the gate of a construction site, wouldn't take a step further without putting on a hard hat, gloves, a high-vis, boots. It's that instinctive now that we have to prepare ourselves for this environment. I think we need to get to the same place with mental health and well-being. It is just as important as physical health and safety. I think that message I'd like to come through loud and clear is that we all have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility, whether you struggle with your mental health or not. We all have a task to look for the signs, to create an environment where it is safe to open up and talk about your feelings, and where we can point people to support if they need it. That's hard for someone who doesn't struggle with their mental health. It's hard for someone on a physical construction site who's never experienced or been subjected to a physical accident. But it's the same thing. It's that level of empathy and understanding, even if it doesn't affect you. I think the really important thing that I'd like people to take away from the Get Construction Talking campaign, as I said earlier, is those simple questions. Saying to that person you know better than anyone, are you okay? You don't seem yourself lately. Are you sure you're okay? And asking twice, are you sure you don't seem yourself lately? Should we go for a walk? Should we have a chat? How are you holding up? Those questions coming from someone close to you can really help that person get some stuff off their chest. And if they need to, you don't have to solve it. You don't have to diagnose them or treat them. No one's qualified to do that outside of the professionals. But if you can point them towards support from the fantastic construction mental health charities around the world, we're partnered with some in the US, the UK and Australia. If we can enable everyone in our industry to do that, I think we'd make a cultural shift on this overnight. I don't know if you agree, but I think that for me is where we need this grassroots drive.
Yeah, I completely agree. I smile because I think of my experiences in the field and what I know are still a lot of individuals experiencing the field, and this feels like a very foreign world you're describing, because there's a lot of hazing, there's a very the exact opposite of psychological safety exists in the field. So I'm smiling and laughing because the dichotomy of what we practice in the field versus what we're talking about feel worlds apart. But you're 100% correct. The issues in that construction is grappling with mental health are real and need to be acknowledged and needs a day of reckoning. I think recently the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States just released its new occupational report and showed that we're trending in the wrong direction. So fatalities on job sites increased by a little over 7%, and suicides increased by 13%, and this is in 22 over 2021. So we're showing that what we're doing today and how we're operating is causing us to trend in the wrong direction. So how do we step back and acknowledge and look at what we can do as individuals within the industry as well as leaders? And for individuals, you've made this campaign as accessible as possible. It's literally caring for the people you work around. Educating yourself to understand what are the warning signs of somebody who may be in distress, and understanding and they're symptomatic, so you can actually see true warning signs. And then just being caring enough to be aware and to reach out and to ask someone how they're doing. The level of listening that an individual needs to do is really the main exertion an individual needs to do, is to check in with somebody and then to be willing to sit with that person and listen to what they have to say. You don't have to have a response. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be a mental health professional. You need to care and listen and give them a chance to share what's happening with them. So this is very accessible for every individual within construction. But I think what is exciting to see is with the nonprofits that we are partnering with, they have created a plethora of toolkits for the business. So as business leaders say, well, what are we doing operationally to address this issue? We did a great job with health and safety, to your point, making this an integral part of the business, a part of human behavior and the culture of construction. But what we're finding is by not understanding or not acknowledging the mental health component, we've left out a major piece of, and to be frank, the culture of construction, the ability for construction sites to be, there's to be a safe space on a site to have a conversation. It impacts your productivity. If people are not communicating with each other, if people are somehow at odds with each other, I will tell you the performance of that project is suffering. When we look at some of the best projects, and you and the B1M have covered them, across the globe, I will say the common factor between them is they were highly collaborative. They had open communication where all the different parties, including the owner to the general contractor, design team, as well as the field and the trade partners, were able to openly talk and discuss to overcome challenges. That's really what will unlock business performance. And I think that's why this piece about mental health is so important for business leaders, especially, to be able to be ready and poised to take action.
It's such an important point, because a big thing about what we're saying here is there aren't barriers to entry. I think people can look at the mental health issue and feel quite intimidated by it because it's quite a difficult, quite emotive thing to talk about. But actually what we're asking people to do is look for the signs and point people to support if they feel they need it. And that's as straightforward as it is to become one of those millions of mental health first aiders we're talking about around the world. Deliberately making it as accessible as possible, breaking down that barrier to entry, I think is really important. There's a free toolkit you can download on the getconstructiontalking.org website, which enables people and organisations to take that first step, to understand what those signs are and to point them to one of these fantastic construction mental health charities around the world. We're very clear that those charities know what they're doing. They're already doing a great job in the industry. We're not trying to replicate them. We just want to lift them up and give them more exposure and give them more support to help them tackle this industry issue. What we're doing is raising awareness. What they're doing is helping tackle the issue. A big part of this as well is about investing in those organisations so that they're able to better support the industry. There are big organisations out there for physical health and safety. There's quite a lot of infrastructure around that. But when it comes to mental health and mental well-being, I think there is a gap there to better support the mental health charities that we have around the world. And I'm really proud that we're partnered with the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention in the US, Mates in Mind and Construction Sport in the UK, and the Lighthouse charity in the UK. and also Mates in Construction in Australia. So between those charities, the fundraising we've done for them through the Get Construction Talking campaign is fantastic. The lifting up we've done of them, I'm really proud of, and it's great to see that the increased awareness worldwide of mental health generally, but also the charities as well.
Yeah, and well done remembering all those names of all of our partners. But the investment piece, I think, is an important first step, especially for business leaders. As you're looking at the talent crisis and the shortage of talent, skilled talent available to be brought into our industry, majority of the headlines that exist in each country when any mainstream news media talks about construction is negative. Construction causing delays, an accident on the job site, God forbid, construction lawsuits, and so the mainstream media is not helping us to advertise how amazing this industry is. And for a business to be able to publicly say we are investing in these mental health charities as a recognition of a piece of our job as business owners is to consider the health and safety of our employees, including their mental health. That resonates with this next generation coming to look for work. They're very fluent in conversations. If I talk to my niece or if I talk to friends, children, and they're young adults, they're more fluent than I am around mental health, around understanding mental health diagnoses, around the understanding of the intricacies of it, medications. And so I think for businesses, that investment is something that taking that first step is the first step to say, we don't have all the answers, but we are investing in the individual agencies that are creating the resources that we will then implement with our business.
Absolutely, we're on the journey. And I think in the context of a skills crisis, where there's not enough skilled labour coming into this industry, showing to the young generation that we understand this issue, we are compassionate, we are empathetic, and we are dealing with this issue is critically important. We're not going to attract the best talent worldwide by being, unfortunately, top of the charts for poor mental health. We need to tackle that and show that we're tackling it in order to put a compelling case to those young people. The RICS in the UK describes it as a war for talent, and it is very much, I think, a war for talent to bring those young people into the construction sector and get them to build their careers here in an industry where you can shape the world, change the world, and build a better place for our children.
And I think the thing that may surprise business leaders is, and one of the benefits we've had in starting this conversation is the people in your company want this to be addressed. They want to know that they have a place to go to have a conversation. They want to know the path to come forward to say, I'm struggling, whether that's alcohol, addiction, gambling, depression, whatever it is, they want to be able to have a place within that organization to have that conversation. And it's in the conversations that you and I have had with business leaders that to me has been the most buoying, because when you hear leaders talk about the actions that they've taken, I'm thinking obviously of Alison Myram's and the interview in Sydney, it was incredible to hear her talk through her experience as a woman in the executive suite and the workers who would come to her to divulge what some of the challenges were. But more importantly, hearing her story as a CEO, recognizing, okay, I've just stepped in as CEO of this company. I have a blank sheet of paper in front of me. What am I going to do to make a difference in my time here as a leader? And the things that she enacted, the 5-day work week, her working in conjunction with federal agencies there in Sydney to not only look at the policies around what a 5-day work week looks like, but then to track how did absenteeism rates do, how did sick leave do, employee sentiment, all of those things showing an upward tick into the right, upward, increased employee satisfaction, decreased sick time, decreased sick leave, and which is exactly what a business should be looking at from the metrics. So being able to hear what leaders have done to change policy and actually create sustainable change, I think has been very, very buoying. Like it makes me optimistic, which in other ways I may not be as optimistic, but I think that's what it takes is leaders taking those steps, making true changes, and the people within the business immediately reacting and showing how much that really matters to them.
For people watching this who understand the challenge, they understand the need to act, what's the one thing they can go away from this video and do? When they stop watching this, what's that one thing they can start doing for free immediately that would make a difference?
In my mind, it's be open, be curious, and be a listening ear. So be aware of the people around you. Be compassionate enough to check in with somebody. And if you're only comfortable just saying, how are you, and is everything okay? That's enough. Honestly, that's enough. That's really all we're asking, and I think that's all it takes, because what transcribes or what happens from there is a pretty natural interaction between two humans. What happens is someone says to you, hey, I'm really struggling to get my new car, this new car that I want, but I'm not sure which model to go to. I'm not sure which one fits my needs. You turn to the internet, you research, you find out, well, let's have a conversation. I tried this model. We as humans are wired to, when we're curious and caring and open, we're wired to problem solve together.
Absolutely, and I think the words, we say get construction talking, it's a very simple kind of 3-word slogan in a way. The talking part can be really hard, and I know this, I'm a guy, I've worked on construction sites, I know what the environment's like, I know what guys are like, and the T word, talking, can actually be really, really hard, especially when you're worried about putting on a strong front, keeping going, being reliable, being part of the team. I think my message to people is that, I tried not talking about what I was going through for a while, but it doesn't work. In the end, it eats you inside, and opening up and talking about it, I don't mind saying I got to the point where I was at rock bottom and I thought I had nothing left to lose other than just to open up and talk about it, which was hard and it was sad, but it made a big difference. What I would say for people who don't feel able to talk about it or don't feel able to ask the people closest to them about it is that there are, if you can't do that step, there are anonymous support lines, there are anonymous texting services. Sometimes just saying the words on a helpline, and again, I don't mind saying I rung a helpline when I was at my lowest point. Just articulating the words out loud to a stranger you've never met can sometimes, as a guy, be really, really hard. There are text services, so texting someone, writing it down in a text message, not actually having to say the words, can be really helpful as well. Yeah, so I'm conscious of people listening that we're saying get construction talking, but that little T word is actually really hard, and it's a big thing to get over. But if we can do it, and if we can create a cultural shift where people feel safe and able to do it, and that it won't make them look weak or affect their career or affect their standing, I think we would make a huge difference on this issue almost overnight.
Well, thank you for role modeling what that looks like and being brave enough to share your story, and not just share it and then kind of like, okay, I did it, but to actually build a campaign together, partnering with Procore, really creating a space in our industry for us to figure this out together. There's so much opportunity still ahead for this industry. I'm still so passionate about what it is that this industry does. And I'm still in it 20 plus years later because it has some of the best people. I've had so many people who were going down completely different paths in college, had one person in their university who said, hey, have you ever thought about construction? And then brought them to a job site and did an internship. And they all said the same thing. It has the most down-to-earth, salt-of-the-earth people. And I think there's so much opportunity ahead for us as an industry. So thank you for starting the conversation.
No, thank you for supporting it. I was going to ask you one final thing. I've known you for almost 10 years. You and I have seen a huge amount of change in this industry. But I wonder, in the last 10 months, what's been the thing that's inspired you the most?
Oh gosh, I think the thing that's inspired me the most is just the bravery I've seen in other people. That when given permission to have a conversation around something as sensitive as mental health, the clear-eyed, very brave commentary we've heard and we've received. And when I mean brave, I mean from the spectrum of individuals who said, I've never struggled with my mental health. I don't understand this world, but I want to. That's brave. Admitting that you don't have expertise in something, that's brave. Down to individuals who, when presenting to a room and asking people to raise their hands around mental health experiences, and then the final question being, how many of you have experienced a mental health crisis of your own? Thinking of one individual in particular, raised his hand so high, wanting to talk about what his experience was, because there is a very clear light at the end of the tunnel. There is a very positive side to this conversation, which eliminates human suffering. And so I think that's the piece that's been probably the most surprising to me, is just the human bravery.
Absolutely, yeah, I would agree. I think that almost that empathy, that understanding that behind all of us, all this kind of facade we've all put on to be super professional and switched on and delivering and knocking it out of the park all the time, actually everyone admitting a little bit that we do all struggle with this, we can relate to this sometimes, we felt the same way, has almost been like a huge pressure valve being released. And what I would say as well is, I know there are some people watching who I think will think that that makes you weaker, particularly as a man. We're supposed to be, society says we're supposed to be very strong. It doesn't make you weaker at all. And I think what's been really refreshing is seeing strong, successful people acknowledge their challenges, the weaknesses, the stuff they're dealing with. For me, I think that makes them even stronger, not weaker. Chief among those people, I'd say, was Michael Phelps. I know he's not in construction, but the guy is superhuman. He has more gold medals, I think, than anyone ever at the Olympics.
Yeah, top performer.
Yeah, the guy is a machine.
Yeah.
But he struggles with his mental health. And I think for him to open up like that on that stage at Groundbreak gives permission for so many other people to do the same. My last question, we're sitting here in a year's time. We've come back to the same place, we're reflecting. Where do you hope things will be 12 months from now?
I'm really looking for some statistical changes. I'm looking for whatever metrics are being measured within construction around safety, around job site fatalities, and especially around suicide. I'm looking for those numbers to show us that there has been a decrease. We may not get them in a year, as we know. These studies sometimes take years to come out. So I'm looking for that, I think, first and foremost. But second, I'm looking for our voices to be drowned out by all of the others in industry who within their corners of the world have really stood up to say, this is what we're doing around mental health. These are the things that we've implemented to attack it. Here's how it's improving the business. I think I'm looking forward to us being pulled into the background as the foreground becomes full of voices in construction saying, this is what we did, here's how it impacted our business, and this is why we're not turning back.
And for the hard-nosed skeptic looking at this saying, this mental health thing in construction is a waste of time, it's pointless, what would you say to them?
Ask anyone who's in their 80s or 90s about when they look back at their life, what was the most important thing? And they never talk about their achievements academically or professionally. They talk about the people who they loved and who loved them back, the moments that they took and the memories they made, the risks that they took and the memories they made. So I'd say to anyone who's super skeptical is take a wider aperture to look at this conversation as a legacy. What legacy do you want to leave behind in this industry as you retire or as you pass the business on? This is one way that you can really make a difference and show the legacy of what your business created, not just the buildings and structures that exist that generations can see, but the people who you employed to build those buildings, the lives you improved. I think that's going to be the thing that would make anyone who's skeptical to think about this think maybe a little bit differently.
Well, Sasha, your leadership in the industry always inspires me so much, has always inspired me so much, really ever since I came into construction. And to be working with you on trying to tackle this issue is a real privilege. So thanks for talking to us today, and it's good to be working with you.
Thank you so much. It's honestly an honor. This is a joy to get to do this with you and have these conversations within industry. So thank you, Fred.